All the Young Dudes by MsKingBean89, Chapter 74, 5th Year, Pain. Remus overslept the next morning and would have missed breakfast if Pete hadn't shouted his name about 100 times before leaving himself. As the door slammed, Remus rolled onto his back and stared at a chink of light coming through his curtains. He'd slept badly and resigned himself to sleeping badly every night until he'd got this ridiculous Sirius thing out of his system. The first thing to do was stop thinking about it, he told himself, sternly, jumping up out of bed and heading straight for the shower, cold as he could stand it. James and Sirius must have left early for Quidditch. A memory of Sirius in his scarlet robe surfaced, hair pulled back, face glistening, the energetic, competitive glint in his eyes. Remus groaned and turned the shower knob all the way down from lukewarm to icy. He forced himself to think about something else. Charms, or arithmancy, or history. Yes, he found that listing off the names of the generals involved in each side of the Great Goblin Revolt of 1642 seemed to calm him down a bit. Gave him something to focus on anyway. You shouldn't have lustful thoughts with names like Krebshunk and Fripp the Disemboweler running through your head. He dressed and headed down for breakfast. The first lesson was Transfiguration, and you could never get away with being late for McGonagall. In the Great Hall, Peter was sitting at the Ravenclaw table with Desdemona, and they were clearly getting reacquainted after a very long summer apart. Remus sighed a little, inwardly, remembering how that felt. It was even worse to watch other couples snogging when you knew what you were missing. Sirius and James were at the Gryffindor table, both dressed in their school uniform, but decidedly rumpled from practice. Their body language was very out of character. Sirius was turned away from James, nose up in the air. James looked furtive and wound up. If Remus didn't know better, he'd have thought they were in the middle of a row. As he sat down opposite his two friends, he found that his impression had been very correct. They were sitting in stony silence, and it was clear that Sirius was being very stubborn about something. "Morning," Remus said, tentatively, reaching for some toast and jam. "Morning, your prefectness," Sirius replied with a half-smile. It was pouring spoonful after spoonful of brown sugar into his porridge. "Hiya, Mooney," James said, glancing at him briefly before turning back to Sirius. He looked worn out, stressed. It did not suit him. "Sirius," he said, very seriously. Sirius ignored him. "Sirius," James repeated, louder. "Not now, Pa. I'm busy." "You're playing with your breakfast," James wrinkled his nose. "And please don't eat that. My teeth hurt just looking at it." Remus thought it looked good, actually. He liked very sweet things, especially when he was in a bad mood. He kept his opinion to himself. Best not get involved, where James and Sirius were concerned. Sirius finished pouring his last teaspoon of sugar, stirred it vigorously until the mixture turned the texture and colour of sand. He scooped it up, heaved a spoonful, then, making eye contact with James, felt time, shoved it in his mouth and chewed. Remus could hear the grains of sugar crunching between his teeth. James shook his head. "You don't have to be like that. I'm not Regulus," he said, grumpily. Sirius scowled at him, then stood up. "Gotta go to the library," he said, his mouth still full of oversweet porridge. "See you in Transfiguration." James sighed heavily, watching Sirius leave. Remus breathed a small sigh of relief, but felt immediately guilty about it. There was obviously something wrong with his friend, and he ought to be as concerned as James. "What's up?" he asked, hoping he sounded calm and caring. "See him limping," James said, still watching Sirius walk out of the hall. Remus looked. He had the same arrogant swagger as usual, his hair swishing and his shoulders back, but... Yes, Remus thought James was right. He looked a little unsteady on his feet. "Something happened at practice?" Remus frowned. "No," James shook his head. "Been like that since yesterday." Remus thought back, scanning his memories. Sirius had been sitting down most of the time Remus had seen him, and, even then, Remus hadn't exactly been looking in great detail. In fact, he'd been trying to do the complete opposite. His guilt took a new dimension. "You think his mum did something?" he asked, his stomach churning. "I know she did," James replied, fiercely. He was looking at the slivering table now. He tried to hide it in the changing rooms, but I caught him in the shower's end. "Merlin, Mooney, if you saw..." "What?" James shook his head, as if he wished he could shake out the image. She's butchered him. A chill ran through Remus that was 10 times more effective than a cold shower. All of a sudden he was 11 again, back in the Quidditch changing rooms after he and Sirius had crashed their brooms. 11-year-old Sirius whispered, "I've got scars." He lifted his trouser leg to show the long, straight silver marks. At the time, Remus had only thought how different they were from his own scars, how neat and uniform, as if they had been done with a razor blade. Later, Sirius had described the scars as a discipline technique. They had never discussed it again. "Is he okay?" Remus asked, shakily, no longer wanting his toast. "He says he is," James replied, "but he won't talk about it or say anything. Ugh, I shouldn't have brought up Regulus like that. He's just so bloody stubborn." "What can we do?" Remus worried. "You can't go back there. It's not right. Can your family do something?" "They tried last summer," James said, sadly. "But no joy. If I can get them to go to someone, Dumbledore, or even Madame Pomfrey, they can see what that old bitch does. Maybe we can get him out." "He won't, though," Remus sighed. "Sirius would never show weakness like that." "Can you try, Mooney?" James asked, desperately. "He won't talk to me, but sometimes you can sort of shock him into it." "Me?" "Yeah, you know. I think he listens to you sometimes. He always wants to impress you." Oh, why did James have to say something like that? They went to Transfiguration and found Sirius already there, studiously ignoring them. It was the same story for the rest of the day. Even at lunchtime, Sirius engaged Mary and Marlene in a conversation before James and Remus could get a word in. He kept them entertained with silly impressions of Peter and Desdemona, so that they were hysterical with laughter. James sat by, grim-faced, his expression not flickering once. They were unable to trap Sirius alone until well after dinner. Peter was once again conspicuously absent, and Remus found that he and Lily were off the road for patrol that evening. They caught Sirius exiting the bathroom, and James stood in front of the door, so he couldn't escape to the common room. Remus decided to go for the direct approach. "Heard you had a shit summer," he said, looking Sirius in the eye. "It was easier, if you were ready for it." Sirius nodded. "What's James been saying?" "That's hurt, but you're too much of a stuck-up git to admit it." "I'm not hurt," Sirius growled, disgusted. "It's healing." "This morning you were bleeding," James said, angrily, clearly at his wit's end. "What?" Remus said, alarmed. "God, Sirius, you have to go to Madame Pomfrey." "Those school know how my mother likes to amuse herself. No thanks." "Yeah, because Madame Pomfrey tells those school everything," Remus said, raising a sarcastic eyebrow. "Let me see. No, Godric, you're worse than Potter." "Come on, I've shown you mine." Remus caught his eyes again and held it. He saw Sirius calculating, weighing up the benefits, and then slowly relenting. "I don't want James to see," he said, looking down, embarrassed. Remus turned and looked at James, whose shoulders slumped a bit with disappointment. Still stoic as ever, he nodded and promptly left the room. Remus felt very vulnerable now, being alone with Sirius. He pushed all the selfish thoughts aside and tried to concentrate on helping his best friend. "Come on then," he nodded at Sirius. "Let's see, one victim to another." He'd meant that as a bit of a dark joke, but realised at once it was the wrong thing to say. He cursed himself and resolved to shut up unless he had something helpful to say. Sirius sat on the nearest bed, which happened to be Remus's, and pulled up his trouser leg. Remus had to hold back a gasp before her. James had used exactly the right word. Butchered. These marks were not neat and ordered, as the earlier scars had been. They were vicious, criss-crossed, varying in depth and severity. The entire box of his calves looked as though someone had sliced them with a surgeon's scalpel. "The Sarah?" Remus asked, trying to keep his face blank. Sirius flinched slightly at this word, but nodded. "Bitch," Remus said. Sirius laughed. "Goes all the way up," he said. "Shit," Remus breathed. He backed away, then went to his bedside table to rummage around. "I've got something that'll stop it hurting." "It doesn't—" "Don't lie," Remus commanded, pulling out his jar of Murtlap essence. "I know pain." Sirius accepted this. Remus returned and handed him the jar. Sirius looked at it, then at Remus expectantly. "You rub it wrong," Remus said. He shook the jar impatiently. "Come on, I'm not doing it for you. I'm not your house elf. He thought he'd been doing pretty well, but it would all come crumbling down if he had to touch Sirius, even someone as innocent as the calves. Sirius grinned and took them at their bessets. He scooped out a little bit of dollop with his long fingers and smeared some on his leg. Remus saw from the look on his face that it had worked at once. His features relaxed, some of the sharpness left his eye. He must have really been in pain. "Bloody hell, you're amazing, Mooney," Sirius said, cheering up as he continued to apply the essence. Remus blushed and just shrugged. "It's just magic, not like I discovered the stuff." "Yeah, but still." Sirius stood up now and began to unbutton his trousers so that he could do the rest of the cuts. Remus practically leapt back and scrambled towards the door, babbling. I'll give you some privacy. Got to go anyway. Homework." His voice was much higher than he wanted it to be. He practically ran down the stairs and mopped straight into James. "Is he okay?" Yeah, I gave him something for it. Just give him a minute. I think he'll be down." "Brilliant. Thanks, Remus." "I didn't talk to him about going to a teacher or anyone." "Yeah, but he's still talking to us now," James beamed. "Seriously, thanks, Mooney. You're a legend. I'm going to pay you back. I'm not supposed to say anything about it yet. Well, I promise we're going to." With that, James clapped him on the shoulder, then ran up the stairs to see Sirius. Remus sank into a nearby armchair and decided to reassess a few things. He had to get away in case they came back down. He left the common room and went to the library, where he spent the rest of the evening painstakingly studying Goblin Rebellions. It was hours this year, after all, and he couldn't allow his lobotomy to wreck everything he'd been working for. It was almost curfew by the time he'd felt ready to leave. His eyes itched and his back ached, and he was in a bad mood. But at least he wasn't thinking about Sirius anymore. Well, not really. He left the library and walked quickly up the dark corridors to the Gryffindor Tower. He was at least halfway there when he heard an odd sort of noise, like a whimper, at the end of the charm's hallway. Sighing to himself, he went to investigate. Lily would have his guts for the scars if he didn't. It was as he had suspected. 2 Slytherins had cornered a Ravenclaw first year and were tormenting him. They had him in a binding curse. Remus had been in that position plenty of times. "Expelliarmus," he called out, and the 2 Slytherins' wands flew into his hands. They turned, one dark-haired, one fair. Barty Crouch and Regulus Black. "Oh, you two," Remus yawned, leaning casually against the wall. The Ravenclaw scurried off, squeaking a quick "thank you" to Remus as he did. "Loony Lupin," Barty smirked. He had a horrible smile, as if he'd never really known joy or happiness. "Watch your tongue, Crouch," Remus hissed, then shot a curse at him. At once, Barty's tongue began to swell up, turning purple as it did so. He clutched at it desperately, but it was one of James's engorgement charms and could not be stopped. "Better get to the hospital wing," Remus smiled pleasantly. "I'll send you once to your head of house. Let him know you're out of bounds." "How dare you," Regulus seethed, marching over to Remus. He was much shorter, almost the same height as Sirius, but it didn't stop him from squaring up to the 5th year. The summer had clearly treated Regulus poorly too. He was paler than ever, his eyes dark and hollow. "Filthy half-blood scum. You might be a prefect, but you're still just a cowardly dirty." "Cowardly, am I?" Remus saw red and dropped both wands, instead using his hands to ram Regulus against the wall by his neck. The younger boy's head hit the brick wall, and he blinked, genuine terror showing in his face. Remus didn't care. In fact, it was perfect. "I may be a half-blood," Remus hissed menacingly, "but at least I don't stand by and watch my family get cut to shreds." Regulus's eyes widened, and a terrible haunted look came over him. "I told him to stop pushing her, but he wouldn't listen," he whispered. "I couldn't stop her." Disgusted, Remus let go, but he was still choking further down the hall. "You're a coward, Regulus Black," Remus said, very quietly. "Don't ever forget it." He spat at Regulus's feet and walked away.